Our YouTube are back, we're talking FF7, we're talking Rebirth, and we're here to look at some more, say with me, translations from the Ultimania. Of course we are. There's one thing we're going to do really quickly here at the beginning. It's not about the Ultimania, and it's that Hamaguchi and Kitase are going to be a part of Tribeca Festival, or I don't know if it's Tribeca Film Festival. It's not just films anymore. Wikipedia, they changed their name in 2020, which I wasn't aware of. Anyways, the event will be taking place from June 5th to June 16th, but Hamaguchi and Kitase will be a part of the event specifically on June 14th. This week earlier that says, we're excited to announce from Fire to Firaga, Remaking Final Fantasy VII with Yoshinori Kitase and Naoki Hamaguchi, hosted by Tribeca on June 14th at 7:30 p.m. at the FFVIII Theater in New York City. Tickets go on sale April 29th. And Tribeca has a little bit of an article on their website about this that says, Naoki Hamaguchi, the director of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and Yoshinori Kitase, the producer of the game and director of the original Final Fantasy VII, discuss what it's like remaking the beloved classic and bringing an iconic cast of characters to life in the modern age. With technology so much more advanced than when the original game launched in 1997, what narrative techniques do they use to update and reimagine a story that many video game fans consider one of the greatest tales ever told? And also, according to their article, the event will be 60 minutes long, which is kind of crazy. So this is pretty cool for what it is. My only thing is, like, we've heard them talk about remaking FF7 a lot. They've been talking about it since like 2019, right? All the time. What it's like to remake the classic FF7 and all other shit. I don't know what can be said more that we haven't already heard. Maybe there'll be some unique shit here. It is a 60-minute event, which we haven't had really many of those other than like maybe the TGS event. I don't know that we've ever hit like an hour too often with events for the remake project, right? I always go back to like the E3 event back in like 2019, which was like 20, 30 minutes or something. It wasn't that long realistically, right? So a 60-minute event is exciting. I just don't know what kind of... I don't know what else can be said about them remaking FF7, I guess. Anyways, let's hop into this shit. FF7 Rebirth World Design Director Masanori Sato says in the game's initial draft, players were going to be guided to chocobo stops by a white stray dog. Later, this was changed to a full-size chocobo, but the staff clamored for a smaller, cuter design. So that's a little interesting. It doesn't really matter technically what guides you to the chocobo stops. I guess it makes more sense to be a chocobo, and if it had been a little white dog, whatever. If it had been a full-size chocobo, whatever. The little chocobo, not chicks, I guess. Little young chocobos are cute. And I like that they're all different, all the different regions, too. They're all like slightly different and shit. Kind of whatever, but interesting that it used to be dogs at one point. FF7 Rebirth lead world designer Zanyu Liu says there was a period during development when Junon's mountain chocobos were called river mountain chocobos, like in the original game. And they could scale both cliffs and waterfalls. This ultimately went unimplemented, however. So I actually like this one too because for one, it was initially a callback to the original game with their name or whatever, but also the idea that chocobos, at least at one point in the Junon area, could climb waterfalls as well. That could be like maybe a hint towards something that could be implemented in the third game. Like maybe they could have a chocobo in a particular region that can climb waterfalls, or hopefully they go the route of like chocobo breeding in the third game, something along those lines, because I know some people want that. We're expecting that with this game. We didn't get it. I'm not the biggest fan of chocobo breeding, but I get it because it was in the original game. I get why you kind of want it. I wouldn't mind it. That, or maybe we get a chocobo singular, but it can, like, get abilities and shit in the third game. And I think it'd be a little more interesting to have, like, one chocobo that travels with us for our whole journey in the third game, and we even have the chocobo stable in the high wind, according to the original FF7. It'd be kind of cool to, like, improve that one chocobo throughout the journey. It just kind of gains abilities. We go to a new region, it can, like, learn abilities to, like, you know, climb waterfalls and swim and climb walls. Maybe get all the abilities that are in Rebirth and maybe new ones that are going to be in the third game, right? It'd also be a way for them to like add new shit to the previous regions that are in Rebirth. If you have like a chocobo that you can take to another region with a new ability, they could add on. Like there's all the rock climbing shit in Junon, obviously, right? You could add like some rock climbing, wall climbing segments in other regions if you have a chocobo that has that ability, right? It'd be kind of cool, I think. And then speaking of the ability to climb waterfalls, if they put that in the third game, you could go back to areas that have waterfalls and your chocobo could go up them, and maybe there's treasure up there or something. I don't know. FF7 Rebirth creative director Nomura says the Wutai and the OG felt very subdued in terms of atmosphere. He decided to move it to part 3 of the remake project to emphasize its sense of presence and make it feel convincing that Shinra considers Wutai a legitimate threat. Kitase says that Wutai will have the same Asian flavors it did in the original game, but also some more militaristic elements this time around. Nomura adds that Wutai's military might will be depicted in a different way from Shinra's, and he hopes players look forward to it. That's something I've actually liked about the remake project so far, is them like holding off on Wutai, given like kind of putting the background of like remake and rebirth, and you experience it in Crisis Core a bit, and just kind of letting us like get a little bit of info about Wutai as it goes, and trying to make them a legitimate threat to Shinra, which they never felt like they were in the original FF7. I mean, you go to the location of Wutai, and it's just this quaint little Asian village. You don't even get the sense that they could ever at all compete with Shinra. It never made any sense. It's a little more believable with Crisis Core because you go on actual missions to like the Wutai region, to Fort Tamblin and stuff with Zack, and you fight a lot of the Wutai soldiers and like a lot of those like side missions and shit you can do with Zack, right? So you get the sense that there's an actual military presence, but you don't get that the original FF7, right? So I like that they're going that route with the remake project where they want them to be a believable threat to Shinra, and it makes a little more sense. I'm very excited to see what they do with the location. For sure, dude, because I love Wutai. It's always stood out to me. Like, it's an optional location in the original FF7, right? Entirely. It's just so unique looking compared to like everything else in the original FF7, and I just always love the location. So I'm very much looking forward to it. Of course, we'll get more like backstory with Yuffie. We'll probably learn more about Sonon and Melfi and just all that other shit too, which is very exciting. Nomura says the Final Fantasy VII compilation titles and novels have minor discrepancies in terms of lore and how the story unfolds, and every player has their own personal Final Fantasy VII world. The remake project was started to unite these countless versions of Final Fantasy VII. So that itself's not new information. They've been talking about this forever, about, you know, trying to use all the bits of the compilation into the remake project. That itself's not new information, right? One thing that's always bothered me, though, is like the discrepancies they're talking about here. Like, the biggest one that I can think of is like the Last Order, whenever like Cloud and Sephiroth are doing their little fight in the reactor, and like Sephiroth just throws himself into the Mako, into the reactor or whatever. That's always like bothered me because what the fuck was that? Like, what is the point in that? Why would they change that? It's always been since the original FF7 that it was Cloud stabbed Sephiroth and threw him, and for whatever reason when they made Last Order, they're like, Sephiroth just throws himself. I have my problems too with the original scene itself. I mean, I talked about like the absurdity of, you know, Sephiroth stabbing Cloud, but somehow like Cloud willing himself down to the ground and then lifting up Sephiroth, and Sephiroth not let go of the sword. Like, some aspects of it are kind of ridiculous, and I get why maybe they wanted to change it, but like it just was weird, right? It's a problem in the community. Sephiroth throwing himself into the Mako. But also there's other shit too. There's other discrepancies with the whole reactor segment, like Genesis and Crisis Core being a part of it, so on and so forth, right? And the Gold Hilt Buster Sword that they wanted in Crisis Core, they wanted it in Advent Children, and then we get to the remake project. They even show it because they pull a scene directly from Advent Children at the end of remake. But then we get to like the remake project and Crisis Core Reunion, and they get rid of it, and now it's no longer a thing. And it's like, why do we even change it at all? What was the point in changing the Buster Sword, the iconic Buster Sword? There's definitely aspects of the compilation that I'm not a fan of, and I question why the hell they change anything at all, especially when it was mostly all Nojima, right? He's kind of pinned to everything when it comes to the compilation. So it's like, why was he changing stuff kind of on the fly here and there and add stuff that didn't need to be added and whatever. It's just weird. So at least with the remake project, it's trying to kind of course correct the whole compilation, which I do appreciate. This one I thought was really interesting. During the second phase of its boss fight, Jenova Lifeklinger will use a move called Prismatic Compression Initiate in Japanese. Later, if players take too much time dealing damage to Jenova Lifeklinger, it will use a highly damaging, unblockable move called Spatial Collapse. So that by itself is kind of interesting, but it's also this quote tweet from Turquoise Hammer, who helps do translations for Shinra Arc that I wanted to read as well, that says, I always felt it would be lame if Jenova is the one with the power to manipulate space-time instead of that being something Sephiroth cultivated himself, but it looks like that might be the case. I wonder if she used it in the past. So if I'm interpreting that right, it might be that Sephiroth's ability to like know about these other worlds and maybe travel to the other worlds and shit is something that he got from Jenova, since she has this like spatial collapse and these compression shit, these abilities that she has at the end of Rebirth, right? It can imply that she has some manipulation of time, and I think it's kind of interesting too that she has an attack called Prismatic Compression Initiate, or just Prismatic Compression in English. Because we actually talked about like time travel and shit like a long time ago in regards to remake with like, because we're fighting in the singularity. What is a singularity? We talked about wormholes and the event horizon and black holes and all that other shit, right? And the word compression comes up when you like researching and looking at that shit, right? And the only other Final Fantasy that, as far as I'm aware, that deals with like compression shit is Final Fantasy VIII, right? With Ultimania wanting to do time compression. So it's kind of interesting that we talked about that back then. And I brought those comparisons together, and then we get to Rebirth, and then you have Jenova having these time-related sounding abilities, but specifically one with the word compression in it. Now, obviously, now that we've got to the second game of the remake project, we know that we're not really like directly dealing with time travel. We do have the multi-world shit, and those are happening at similar-ish times, but slightly different times too. They are happening like post, remake with like, in one of them at least, like it's post like the highway scene, all that other shit, right? Post reactor bombings, post plate fall, stuff like that, right? But still, they are like slightly different time frames. So there's an aspect of that. But maybe this all comes from Jenova. Maybe also I like this just because we're getting potential lore for Jenova, right? More about Jenova. If she has this like these space-time kind of abilities, right? Because we know nothing about her other than she fell to the planet, fought with etc., and then obviously, soldiers and shit now and Sephiroth and kind of what she can do when she's a part of somebody's like anatomy and shit, right? We don't have a lot of like lore for her, but maybe that's what the end of Rebirth's kind of hinting at now with these like abilities and shit. Asked about Rebirth in the title, Nomura says the main idea was to have it mean something similar to Remake, Also, he looked for a word that would say, "It's fine to start from here," to let people know they could enjoy themselves even if they started with this title. Plus, even though Aerith is very much a key figure in the story of FF7, this is also a story about Sephiroth. He thinks you could say the title applies not only from the perspective of the game's main characters, but from that of the person they're trying to defeat. So I think that's also not necessarily like brand new information, because I think they've talked about stuff like this before. But I do like that, even though Rebirth is a completely different word in a lot of ways than Remake, it is a similar-ish word, which gives you an idea of what they might do with the third title, like a word that's going to be similar to Remake, a word that's similar to Rebirth. People have been theorizing forever what the word is going to be. I'm sure somebody's guessed it by now. It'll be interesting to see what they choose for a title, though. I'm not sure what the most popular guesses are out there. I know I've heard Requiem a lot, which doesn't really relate, I don't think, to Remake or Rebirth. But people did guess the word Rebirth, which, again, people are just going to guess every RE word possible, so somebody's going to be right inevitably. It's actually two-parters, so we're just going to read them together. FF7 Rebirth lead boss battle designer Kazuo Hori says when Elena is rolling on the ground after you dodge her Elena knuckle move, she can actually damage Rude. So if you guide her toward him, there's a chance you'll see him launched into the air, which is kind of funny. But then it's also followed with FF7 Rebirth lead boss battle designer Kazuo Hori says Elena's Elena knuckle attack is based on an event that takes place during the original game in Icicle Inn, which we haven't yet visited. He's glad the team was able to slip in the move ahead of time. And there's the type of shit that I absolutely love when it comes to the Remake project, is that attention to detail. I didn't even pick up on this. I wouldn't have even caught this if they didn't point it out to me. But it's a callback to the original FF7 because she has the segment in Icicle Inn where she goes to Punch Cloud and you can dodge it or get hit. If she hits you, like knocks you out or whatever. So it makes sense that she have like a punching attack. But also in the original game, if you dodge it, she just rolls down the hill towards like Great Glacier or whatever, right? And same thing in Rebirth. Like if you dodge Elena knuckles, she'll like roll around on the battlefield and you can guide her to hit Rude. But something else I learned that's cool with Rebirth, because I was trying to find a clip of Elena doing the Elena knuckle and like dodging it and watching her roll around just to show in the video. I actually came across an account called Drakey C, who has a clip of him dodging the attack, or them, I guess. But you can actually make Elena kind of like fall off the map where you're actually fighting at, and she has to like run back through the mines entirely to get back to the fight, which actually is a cool little tip, maybe even for like hard mode, potentially. If that's a hard fight in hard mode, I have no idea. I haven't got there yet.
Whoa!
Personally thought that was pretty damn interesting. The fact, for one, that this person found that. I don't even know if they're the first person that ever found it. But also the fact that that's a thing in the game. The devs decided, it's very intentional, because there was like some falling off the map glitches and stuff with Remake. So it could be like an accidental thing, but the fact that there's an animation of Elena like running back to get into the fight and shit means it was very intentional by the devs. And again, that's that shit I like. We need more like environmental like aspects to the fighting. Maybe something really cool to do in the third game where like, depending on the boss fight, depending on the area, you can maybe interact with the environment a bit. That was supposed to be something that they were going to implement into Remake, I think, initially. Like, an example they gave was, like, the Guard Scorpion fight back in the day. This was, like, 2017 or something. Where he's supposed to be able to destroy the environment and, like, it would, like, affect the terrain and stuff. And they do that a bit, obviously, because you get to the point where you got to hide behind the walls with Barret and Cloud. But I need more of, like, that, but more so like the Elena shit, where, like, maybe you can guide one of the bosses or the enemies to, like, a location within the battle arena area, and they can, like, knock something over, maybe it falls on them, does some extra damage to them, or opens up another area that you can kind of go to and fight if you need, like, a breather, something like that, right? Just, like, aspects of, like, the environment changing, or being able to, like, incapacitate an enemy for, like, a couple seconds, like, knocking a lane off the side of the cliff. And now that I'm talking about it, too, it makes me wonder, when it comes to Rebirth, are there more of these fights like that? Like, can you guys let me know that in the comments? Are there more fights where you can, like, affect the bosses, or affect the fight somehow, like knock a lane off the side of the cliff? Can you do that to other bosses, or is there anything else you can do in the middle of a fight to, like, incapacitate a boss for a couple of seconds or something like that? That's, like, so interesting. It'd be so weird to only be Elena. Like, I wonder if you can do that. Also, you fight Elena and Song in the Temple of the Ancients. Can you knock her off the fucking side of the Temple of the Ancients platform that y'all fighting on? Is that a possibility? I don't know. Fucking fall to her death? That'll be pretty much it for the video, my dudes. I wasn't planning on the Elena segment being quite as long as it was going to be, and I wasn't even planning on being the last thing we talk about in the video, because usually I try to say like the best for last as usual. But the more I was like looking at it and learning about it, I was like, this is so interesting. I want to talk about this extensively, so we say that for the end. I thought it was really, really cool. But of course, what are your thoughts? Talk about a lot of shit here where it seems like the translations are kind of slowing down. Like Audrey hasn't really done translations in quite a while, and Shinra's only done like a handful or so in the past like several days. And they're free to do it at their own pace or whatever. So I don't know what we're going to talk about going forward if like the translations are starting to slow down. We'll have to maybe get into the theory territories potentially. Anyways, dudes, that's the video. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new. Source works in the description below. Follow me on Twitter, _DaveYT. That's it.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more, and nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in here like Logain or leave it like Cobain.